Hey YouTube, my name's Dan, and I like to work on projects as I can. I have some bad hips, but this machine here is a project I've worked on. It was originally a chuck wagon, like a 2008, 7, something like that. And it had a little Subaru engine in it. And we drove it for about a year or so. And then the Subaru engine blew up, as they do. So I thought I was going to have just a big old hunk of junk sitting around. And I called around and found out that the Harbor Freight's Predator engine might work in this machine. So I said, well, that's the best bet I have. So I went down to Harbor Freight, and I got the Predator 670 and put it in this chuck wagon. It's by American Sportworks. Brister, I think, is a parent company, or American Landmaster, I believe, is now the main company. And it was a direct bolt-on. It worked out really well. The only thing was the exhaust was pointing the wrong direction. So eventually I got around to building a custom exhaust for it. So I took off the muffler and I cut the flanges, and I went and found out, of course it's hard to find 1-inch exhaust tube, but what I did find is that 1-inch electrical conduit works really great, and it's readily available at your local hardware store. And so I bought some of that conduit, and I tried to, I have a bender from Harbor Freight, and I couldn't make a really tight bend, which is what you need right there. And so I looked on Amazon, or maybe it was eBay, I think it was Amazon, and I found some 1-inch pipe that they're 90 with 6-inch legs. And I bought, they were a little expensive, they were like $16 a piece, so I bought 2 of them. And it turns out that they were just small enough that they would slide right into the 1-inch electrical conduit. So it made it a lot easier to connect everything tacked up, you know, get it all tacked up with the header connected to the engine, and then unbolted and finalize all the welds. Please don't make fun of my welds. I know they're ugly, but they're functional. And then I went and bought a motorcycle muffler. There's a motorcycle muffler I bought off of Amazon. It's like 40 bucks. And what I did for a collector was I bought a piece of regular automotive reducer. I think it maybe was 2 1/4 to 1 something. It was just a regular automotive reducer at for exhaust at O'Reilly's, and I just butchered it up. I put the 2 pipes in it, and I cut it with the grinder, and I banged it down with a hammer and bent it and welded it. And anyways, so you kind of, if you're going to tackle a project like this, you kind of already have an idea of what you would have to do to make that work as a collector. But it worked, and I was able to connect that motorcycle muffler fairly easily and weld it on up. And it sounds pretty good. Guess I could start the motor for you. And the other thing I did was, I don't like those pulse fuel pumps, so I put an electric fuel pump on, and it works really good. It doesn't overwhelm the carburetor or anything like that, and it was like $30 off of Amazon, and it works good. It's much better than the pulse, especially at the higher RPMs when you don't. Hi YouTube. Now the other thing I learned about those Predator engines. Oh, by the way, I watched a lot of YouTube videos to try and learn more about these engines, the things you can do with them, and two of the most helpful videos and YouTube channels that I have found for these small engine type projects is Redbeard's Garage and Cars and Cameras. Those Cars and Cameras guys are just wild, crazy guys. They do crazy stuff, really cool stuff. Redbeard's Garage, he does some cool stuff. He knows his stuff. He knows a lot about these engines, and you learn a lot. So I highly recommend those videos for your ideas that you want to do with your small engine projects, your buggy projects, your UTV, ATV projects. So one of the things that I learned about this engine is I have this light on here and I have that winch on there, and I just don't think that this engine is putting out enough power to run. Now it'll run the light okay, but you can still tell, these LED lights, they kind of flicker when they're not quite getting enough power. But it still works really good. The winch, I'm afraid if I ever had to really use it in a pinch and my battery wasn't completely, totally, fully charged with all the amps that it's designed to have, I may be in a bad position, because these Predator 670 engine, from what I've read, I believe the most it puts out is 7 amps. From different places. One place I read it only puts out 2 amps, which is just enough to charge the battery while you're using it. So that's not good for having extra peripherals on your UTV, ATV, buggy. And on this machine, another thing I learned, I saw in a video a guy put a pulley on the output shaft on the outside of his CVT torque converter, and then build a bracket and put an automotive style alternator on, which is great. It worked good on his application. The problem with my machine is I have a Series 94C torque converter, which is a little bit bigger than the 40 series CVT torque converter, And the way it is on there, there's no place to put any kind of a additional pulley. So then I started reading, well, the other end of the engine, the flywheel side of the engine, is also an output, a place you can use to have as an output. You just take off the little grill, and that bolt in the middle. There's a place where you can. They have a what's called a Stub Pto Shaft, and it has a keyway on it, and it's like $200 for that thing for a Honda engine, and it's so expensive. But it's three bolts, but you can actually put a shaft on the flywheel side of the engine and run things off of that as well. And especially if it's a alternator, you can get alternators that can turn either way because there's a fan on both sides of the alternator to pull air through to cool it. So I actually saw another video where this guy put a Predator on a John Deere lawn tractor, on, a bigger one, and he actually used the flywheel side of the engine, and he made his own PTO shaft because his tractor had like a drive shaft. But on this machine, that won't work either because my drive shaft for my four-wheel drive, that goes back to my rear axle to the front for the four-wheel drive, is right in the way of putting any kind of a PTO on the flywheel side of that engine. So what I've decided, and I will put this on video when it happens, when I get the funds, I want to get a 25 horsepower Kohler, I believe it's a 7000 series engine. And those engines have like 41 foot-pounds of torque, which the Predator only has about 35. And the Kohler stator actually puts out, according to their specs, about 25 amps, something like that. And so 25 amps isn't a massive amount, but it's enough to run a few lights and that winch if I have a good battery, because that winch at its maximum capacity of 2,500 pounds will draw like 100 amps. So hopefully I won't ever have to put 2,500 pounds of force on it, but that's what I was reading on a similar box for a similar winch in Harbor Freight. So that's what I want to do, and then I will use my Predator engine for another application. Probably a homemade buggy of some kind. I'm already starting a buggy project. I've decided to do, it's going to be a Franken buggy, where I'm going to take my Yamaha Kodiak 400 and four-wheeler. It's like a 2008 model, I think. But it's got nice 400 cc high pressure, good compression engine. It's nice. Four-wheel drive, disc brakes, one drum brake in the back. It's all enclosed. I believe it probably has a CVT transmission or torque converter type drive, so I don't have to worry about figuring out how to shift gears. And I'm going to cut that sucker up because, see, I can't ride a four-wheeler very easily because I can't straddle it and be comfortable because I have very messed up hip joints. And so I prefer a sit-down type seat type chair vehicle. And so a four-wheeler, straddling type vehicle is just not ideal for me. So I'm going to build a buggy out of it. I'm going to cut it up. I have lots of steel, lots of square tube, lots of welding, and a good shop to weld in, and I'll be videoing that project. So keep tuned for that. And I hope the information that I've given you on adding a Predator engine to a fairly cheap UTV like this has helped you out. I know one of the mysteries is the electrical. It's hard to find any good stuff about the electrical on these engines, so that's what I found. So like and share, and